I'm going to show how to make this Seigaiha pattern using Affinity Photo's procedural texture filter. The Seigaiha pattern is common in Japanese culture and can be traced back to ancient times. I worked on trying to create this pattern for quite a while. I tried using different functions that would bring forward this portion of a circle, and I finally came up with the idea that if I create a full circle in white and then mask it off by multiplying different black areas, so if I can have one that's sort of a circle in black that cuts off the bottom and then both the right and the left sides of it, then I'll end up with just a white mask, and then I can populate that white mask with whatever pattern I want. I can then repeat that pattern and offset it to fill in the other locations. To get started, I'll start with a new document. I'll choose XGA, but change it to 1024 by 1024 pixels. Make sure it's in RGB 8 mode and create that. I will fill that with black, choose the selector button, and add a live procedural texture filter. I'll add a single equation and assign it to all three channels. I'll add a custom real number input A. I'm going to call that scale, and I'll set that to 4. I'll start by creating a coordinate system variable, var, v equals vec2 of x comma y. So usually I use relative x and y coordinates, but I want to align this to the upper left corner of my document, and that way I'll be able to move it over precisely when I create more copies of this filter. I'm going to multiply by A and divide by W. Now I want to make a series of circles, so first I'm going to divide my coordinate system using the fraction command into smaller pieces. To do that, I'll create another variable v1, which is equal to the fraction of v, and then if I look at that, I need to offset the center into the middle of each of the cells. So I'll subtract 0.5, and that will offset that so the center is in the center of the cell. Now I'm going to create my mask, which will be the white one that I'm going to subtract the others from. The VAR M1, I'll have a total of 3 masks, but this is M1. And if I just look at the length of it to get started, and I look at the length of V1, it looks like that. So there are my circular areas, but I can now apply a step function to it. I'm going to use smoothstepn, and that requires 2 additional parameters. I'll just put in 0.5 and 0.5, and that should give me a nice circle that fills this entire region. Now I want to eliminate one of the rows of circles, and I can do that by multiplying an osci. I'm going back to the original coordinate system v dot y, using the y coordinate of that, and when I do that, it eliminates one of the rows of circles. Now I'm going to create a second coordinate system, so I'm going to copy my v1 coordinate system and add a semicolon and paste it over here. And I'm going to label that one v2, and inside of that fraction I need to add a vec2. So I want to shift this over, and so it doesn't move anywhere in x, but it shifts down in y by half a unit. So it'll have a 0 for x in the vec2, and then a 0.5 for y. And that should shift it how I want it. So it looks like that. And now I'm going to make a mask based on that coordinate system, and it'll be very similar to my M1. So I'm going to copy that and paste it here. And I'll call this M2. It's also going to have a smooth step, and the length will be based on V2. And the only difference is, if I look at this one, since I'm using my original coordinate system for the oscillator, I've got to shift this with a negative 0.5. So I have to do a phase shift on that oscillator of negative 0.5. That gives me my circle. Now I want to multiply this, and these are white with a black background. I need the opposite of that. And so I'll just do 1 minus to invert that. And now just to do a quick check, I will multiply M1 times M2 and see if it looks right. Okay, so I have these sort of crescent moon shapes, and that's what I need for the first part of this. Now I need to subtract off another black circle that's going to go in between each of these crescents. To create that, I need another coordinate system, so I'll just copy and paste V2. And I'll label that V3. This one also has an offset, and it's going to be 0.5 in X. And I'm going to show you how I figured out what it was in the Y component. I'm going to put in a variable for that B, and I'll add a custom input, -1 to 1 range input for B. And I'm going to add a second one, C, and I'm going to leave those as variables for now. So there's my coordinates, but when I move B around, I can shift this up or down. So I don't want to shift it down because that gets into the negative numbers up there. So I only want to shift this up, and so I guess I will change that to 0 to 1. I'll leave this -1 to 1. Okay, now I'm going to copy this variable M2 because mask 3 will be very similar to that. So I'll copy that and add a semicolon and paste it over here. And I have to change it to M3, and this is going to be based on coordinate system V3. And I'm going to have a different offset for my oscillator, and so I'm going to just add C to this so I can adjust that later. Now I'm going to look at this, and this is how I sort of figured this out, was to take a Vec2 and put in M1 and M3. And so that'll be assigned to the red and the green channels. So I want to look at how these overlap. And I want to subtract off part of the green one from the red one. So it'll be up about here, and then I want to block off that circle. So this one is up plus 0.75, and this one is back 0.25. So I have a plus. So for B, I'm going to change that to 0.75, and for C, I'm going to change that to a minus 0.25. Like that. Take M1 times M2 times M3, and it gives me my little sort of quarter of a circle. Looks sort of like an axe blade to me, but this little quarter shape up here. Okay, I can delete my B and C variables now. I can multiply by the length of V1, and it has this sort of pattern to it. And if I wanted stripes, I could put that inside of an oscillator. So I could use the oscillator I, and I'm going to add a real input B. I deleted my other B, but I'm going to add a real input B and set that equal to 10, and I'll call this stripes. And I'm going to bring this up to about 14. So there's my basic pattern, and now I have to repeat that, and it turns out I'm going to repeat that a total of 8 times. So I need to make 7 more copies of these, and each one has to be offset by a certain amount. In order to do that efficiently, I'm going to create a variable, a real number input. I'll call it OF, and this will be offset, and I'll start with an offset of 0. Now I'm going to add that to my original coordinate system as a vec2, and it turns out if I take OF divided by 2 for the x component and OF divided by 4 for the y component, that should be the right amount. So to try this out, I'm going to duplicate the procedural texture and then increase the offset by 1. Okay, and the other one went away, so I'm going to change it to add, and there's the pattern. So I'll just do a few more. So if I select that, duplicate, and increase the offset to 2, duplicate, increase the offset to 3, increase the offset to 6, and I've got one more. Duplicate and increase the offset to 7. So there's the finished Seigaiha pattern. Now you'll probably want to make some variations to this, so you could do this, but that's the basic pattern. I could add a gradient map to this, like that. Now if you zoom in on this, there's no smoothing of the edges, and so I'm going to go through that part of it and show how I made it look more smooth like it does up here. One of the problems again with this pattern is that in order to change one thing, you have to delete everything. Delete all those. I'm just left with this one. I'll drag the gradient map down on top here, but I'll turn it off for now. I'm going to have a couple of smoothing functions, and so I'll just add a 0 to 1 slider. I'll call this one S1, and this is smooth. And while I'm working on this, I'm going to take off the this oscillator and just look at the mask. So right now I want to smooth out this mask so it looks a little more smooth. Luckily, I already have the smooth step, and so I'm just going to subtract S1 divided by 10 to the first 0.5 and add S1 divided by 10 to the second 0.5. And you can see that smooths that first circle. I'm going to bring this down until there's just, until it makes it just nice and smooth, but doesn't, blur it too much. And then I'm going to copy and paste this from this one into the other two smooth step functions. So it looks like that, and then I'll put the oscillator back in, and I'm going to use a smooth oscillator so I can smooth that one too. And so the frequency comes first, so I'll have my B times length of V1, same as before, but now I can add another parameter, and I'm just going to call it S2. That'll be a smooth 2, and I need to add a 0 to 1 slider for that, S2, and this is stripe smooth, I'll call it, and bring that down. And okay, so I can smooth out the stripes too, so those are a little smoother. Make sure you have your pattern how you like it before you go on. So I'm going to duplicate this and change it to add. Actually, I can set this one to add too, so I don't have to remember to do that. And then offset this by 1. And I'm going to look at this and see if it looks pretty good. Now I think I'd rather have a little bit darker line here. And so if I increase this to 14.5, and I've got to do this one too, 14.5. Okay, it gives me just a little bit of a dark line at the border. And I like that, so that's why I'm going to do it. And then if I right click and duplicate and increase it by 1, I can build up my pattern again. And turn on the gradient map again. There it is, the Seigaiha pattern. Alright, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.